Oh yeah, I gotta turn it on. Oh, it's going.
Rabbi Malevsky, Moradas Rabbanei Torah, Rabbi Shor, Rabbi Grisman, family and friends. Thank you all for coming this evening. Today is November 11th, Remembrance Day. Growing up in Newfoundland, where it was a statutory holiday, the events associated with it formed an important part of my mother-in-law's early life. We all learned the very special history as it affected Newfoundland, which was not even a part of Canada until 1949. The Newfoundland Regiment fought at Beaumont Hamel in World War I. Of the 780 men who went over the top, only 68 were available for a roll call the following day. My mother-in-law always watched the ceremony from Ottawa and remembered those members of the community who gave their lives defending the freedoms and liberties that we have here in Canada. Tonight and tomorrow, Daled Kislev is the first yortzeit of Lisa and Greta's mother. And we mark another milestone on the road of life, but it's a little more complicated than others. It is the end of the year of Avelut. We've passed the Levaya, the Shiva, the Shaloshim, and the 11 months of Kaddish. And we close the book on the halachic practices of the first year of the passing of a parent. But of course, it's not that simple. 1 year ago, looking ahead seemed like a very long road to travel. And now suddenly, we wonder where the year has gone, and more importantly, what will we do next? We have an opportunity to continue to learn and to grow and to carry on her legacy. I can think of nothing which would be more meaningful in her memory. And Lisa is going to say a few words about how we've chosen this event tonight.
Rabbi Malevsky, Rabbi Shor, friends and family. To paraphrase Dale Carnegie, effective speaking is more than saying a few words to an audience. It is the revealing expression of a human personality. Many of you have heard me speak several times over this past year about our mother. So tonight I'm going to focus on why we chose this gathering, this type of gathering this evening on her first yortzeit. If I tell you that Mom loved learning and growing in both Jewish and secular areas, many of you could say the same thing about your family experience. Except we grew up in St. John's, Newfoundland. Mom grew up in the 30s and the 40s through the Depression and World War II. It was a very small, isolated community, far from any source of Jewish learning, with no television and no university until the 1960s. Yet even as a child growing up in such an environment, Mom always had a passion for reading and learning, a trait she inherited from her father. My father had several businesses, one of which was a bookstore. Mom used this vehicle to fill our home with books and expand her knowledge in both secular and Jewish topics. Whenever Mom managed to have a few quiet moments for herself, she could be found reading to increase her knowledge. She read to learn Jewish history and religious practice. She read encyclopedias and biographies, and Mom acted upon and integrated what she learned into our home. And our home was a hub for family and friends. Because both of my parents were active in community work, we often hosted out-of-town Jewish visitors at our Shabbos and Yom Tov table, therefore ensuring we always had a full table. Mom used these opportunities to continue to expand her knowledge. She put this learning into practice by maintaining a kosher home and gradually becoming Shomer Shabbos with Dad's full support. Their commitment was such that Mom and Dad offered each of us the opportunity to continue our Jewish education even though it meant sending us far away from home. When they followed us to Toronto, they continued to learn and grow to keep up with our young grandchildren of the next generation. As many of you know, I spent much time with Mom over these past years, and we tried to do one special thing each week outside of doctor's appointments and hospital appointments. One of Mom's favorite outings was to go to Yorkdale, where we would inevitably find ourselves at Chapters looking at more books. One of her last purchases was a book about women in science for her first great-granddaughter in Israel, which she insisted on buying and sending to her. Mom enjoyed reading and learning as long as her health allowed, so we felt an evening such as tonight was appropriate to commemorate her first yard site. We thank you all for coming and joining us tonight to honor the memory of our mother, Frumalea Bat Aryalev V'Miriam. May her neshama have an aliyah. Amen.
For my in-laws moving from St. John's, Newfoundland to Toronto after retirement and starting all over again in a new community was a challenge. One of their first priorities was to become members of a shul for several reasons. Number one, the obvious reason, was to have a place to daven. The second reason was to become part of a community and to make new friends. They were greatly assisted in this endeavor by their machatonim, Irving and Lil Reese. Greta and Alan were married in 1983 at Shari Shemayim by Rabbi Hoshander. When my in-laws moved to Toronto in 1986, they selected the Bathurst Glencairn area and Shari Shemayim. After my father-in-law's stroke and they were no longer able to come to us, we started to spend Shabbosim and Chagim down south with them. Eventually, we became members at Shari Shemayim and found ourselves as regular attendees at the Hashkama Minyan. And it was there that we first met Rabbi Shor and heard him speak. Rabbi Shor received his bachelor's in philosophy and psychology at Yeshiva University. His deep appreciation for Zionism and the desire to reclaim and strengthen our historical and religious ties to the land of Israel led to his work as a coordinator for Hasbara fellowships, promoting Israel on college campuses throughout the United States. Rabbi Shor's love for his Jewish heritage, biblical and rabbinic literature, and strong sense of peoplehood brought him back to Yeshiva University to pursue his rabbinic ordination and a master's in Bible. Today, Rabbi Shor is assistant rabbi at Shari Shemayim. Please give a warm welcome to Rabbi Shor.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank Ken, Lisa, and Greta for inviting me to speak here tonight. It is a true honor and a privilege to speak in memory, in commemoration of their mother, Lorraine Nathanson. I know that a talk does not have to last forever in order to be timeless. So in this brief moments that we have together, may the small ideas that I would like to suggest and offer tonight be in Lorraine's merit. May her neshama have an aliyah. May it be for Yisrael a Yeshua. May it be for the Jewish people a saving grace, our learning in Lorraine's memory, in her merit, especially in these trying times as we process recent tragedies. May our learning in her merit also merit all of Klal Yisrael. May it be for Yisrael a Yeshua, and may her memory be for a bracha. Amen. In last week's Parsha, Parshas Toldos, Rivka is very troubled. The pasuk tells us, vayisrotzitzu habanim b'kirba, that the children within her, in her womb, were warring, were disturbing her. Vatomer, and she said, Im kain lama ze anochi. She said, if this is so, then why am I, or what am I? The pasuk is not so easy to translate into colloquial English. Vatelech lidrosh et Hashem. And so because she was disturbed because of what was occurring inside of her, she went to seek out answers from God, from Hashem. So we can bring an easy question on the pasuk. Why was she so concerned by feeling movement inside of her? Wouldn't this be cause for joy and for celebration? Anyone who is aware of what it means to be pregnant, or what it means to have a wife who is pregnant, is aware that children kick inside the womb. They can kick outside the womb as well, right? But they can kick inside the womb too. So why was Rivka so distraught that she needed to lecha? Why did she need to go out and be doresh Hashem, and to seek answers from Hashem? And Rashi offers an explanation, quoting from Bereshis Rabbah. Rashi says the following, in explaining Rivka's distress, Im kain lama ze anochi, if this is true, if there's something going on inside of me, if I'm experiencing these kicks, this kind of battle, or if not a battle, rather, this movement that's very disturbing in her womb, then why am I, or what am I? Rashi, quoting from Bereshis Rabbah, says this is lashon ritza. It's a language of running. Ritz, larutz, ratz, to run. There was a running going on inside of her. Overes al pitche Torah, whenever she would, and I know some of us are very familiar with this medrash, but it is behooving of us to go over it again, just to examine it in a bit more detail. When she would pass the opening of a place of Torah, a base medrash, in this case, Shem ve'ever, the base medrash of one of the first non-Jewish ethical monotheists, Shem ve'ever, v'Yaakov ratz umafreches letzeis. Yaakov would be trying to run to get out of his mother, to go into the base medrash, to learn Torah. Overes al petach avodah zara. On the other hand, if she would go to a place of avodah zara, a place of idol worship, the Esav mifareches latzeis. Esav was itching to get out, to go and to worship avodah zara. So we know what the answer is. Rashi brings the medrash that there were two different people, two different personalities within Rivka. And when Hashem tells her, or the Navi tells her, that there are two nations, in fact, inside of her, she's having twins, Shnei Goyim bebitnech, there are two nations in your belly, the Rav Ya'avod Tza'ir, and the numerous one, or the mightier one, will serve the younger one. This somehow calmed her. But again, why would this calm her? If we think about it, the child can just kick whenever the child wants to kick. The fact that there were two personalities in her womb was a source of comfort for Rivka. So why was this answer helpful to her? And there's an interesting perush that I would like to explore by the Tiferet Shlomo. And the Tiferet Shlomo discusses what Rivka really was afraid of and why she was in fact comforted by this answer. The Tiferet Shlomo was a Hasidic Rebbe in Poland in the 17th century, and he says the following ha'ara. He has the following insight. The fact that the Medrash says that there was kicking or there was a desire to get out, she would have contractions of sorts when she would go to these unique places, was what was troubling her. Why? Because she didn't know that she was having twins. She thought that she was having one child. And when there was one child that was very eager to run to the Beis Medrash to learn Torah, she could live with that. That's something that she could feel proud of. If there was one child that was eager to run to do Avodah Zarah, to go to a place of idol worship, she could live with that too. There was a challenge then in the educational approach that she would have with this child. The child then would have a netiya, a inclination that would lean towards Avodah Zarah, and she could live with that. That was something that she would have to work on as a mother, as someone who would educate her child, as someone who was responsible of being moser to the child, of giving over to this child her values and the values of Torah, the values that she espoused. But what frightened her was that there could have been, in one personality, the desire to do both contradictory things. If you have in one individual someone who wants to run to do Torah and mitzvos, and yet on the other hand, someone who wants to run to do Avodah Zarah, that was something that caused her much distress. That was what gave her much fear. And that's why she asked in Cain, if there is this deep internal inconsistency in my child, because she didn't know that she was having twins, she didn't know that she was having two personalities within her, then, lama ze anochi, what is the purpose of living if I'm inconsistent, or if my lineage is inconsistent? I want to make a distinction between inconsistency and hypocrisy. Right? There's a difference between being inconsistent, right, when we are not always behaving how we should, and being hypocritical, where we say we're going to do something when we do the exact opposite. This fear that Rivka had was beyond those distinctions. This was someone who would have been a pathological liar. She was giving birth to someone who truly desired to do Avodah Zarah. Not who would say that they would do Torah and mitzvos and then behind everybody's back worship Avodah Zarah. This person seemed to truly want to run to do evil. This person seemed, for Rivka, to truly want to run to do Torah and mitzvos, which is nonsensical. Lama ze anochi. And that's what troubled Rivka, according to the Tiferes Shlomo, which is why Hashem's answer was so comforting to her. Because there wasn't, in fact, one self-contradictory personality within her, but there were two very different personalities within her. There's a famous Hasidic saying in which when we read the Chumash, the best perush on the Chumash, or the best explanation and insight we have into the Chumash, is our own understanding of reflecting on how we see ourselves in the characters, in the protagonists in Chumash. And Rav Kook was one of those people, and I would like to read for you now from an essay by Rav Kook, and this is from Hamachshava HaYisraelit. So I'm reading to you from Rav Kook's Sefer, Hamachshava HaYisraelit, and Rav Kook says the following: Mi she'amar alai ki nishmati karua. There's someone who said about me that my soul is torn. Rav Kook had his critics. Anybody who stands up for something, anybody who's a iconoclast or who tends to advance new ideas and who's a very critical thinker or who stands for something strongly. Rav Kook was the first official rabbi in Palestine. So he had his critics, and he's mentioning one of the criticisms that's said about him. Someone said about me that my soul is torn. Yafeh Amar. This person is saying well. They're saying something that's actually beautiful. Bivadai hi karua. Of course it is torn. I efshar lanu leta'er b'sichlenu ish she'ein nishmato karua. It's impossible for us to conceive of someone, to conceive in our minds, of someone whose soul is not torn. Rak hadomem hu shalem. Only the inanimate, hadomem, damam, is something that's quiet and silent. Only the inanimate is shalem. Only the inanimate is whole, is at peace. I once had Dr. Pelkovitz, who teaches, he's a professor of psychology at Yeshiva University, and he would teach us pastoral psychology. He said something very off the cuff, but even though it was off the cuff, it stuck with me. He said the following. He said, life without stress, and when you have stress, it means that there's an unfulfilled expectation, there's something that you need to do, there's something that's not shalem, that's not complete. He said, life without stress is death, right? And that really stuck with me. So Rav Kook is saying, Rak hadomei shalem, only the silent, only those who are inanimate are peaceful. But he, as a living soul, all of us, as living beings, we of course are torn. And this is something that's beautiful. Aval ha'adam, but humans who, ba'al she'ifut hafchiyot. We are people with conflicting ambitions. We have internal inconsistencies. There are contradictory feelings within us. At times there are contradictory thoughts within us. Umilchama pnimit tamid bikirbo. And there is an inner war waging always within us. The chol avodat ha'adam hi, and all the work of man, all of human destiny, our entire work, is for this purpose: le'ached es hakruim shebenafshenu al yedei ra'ayon klali shebegdulato uromuto hakol nichlal balidei harmonia. Le'ached, to unify, et hakruim, that which is torn within us, to make it included, nichlal ubalidei, and ascending towards harmonia, towards harmony, towards a kind of consistency. So what Rav Kook is saying is that someone's criticizing me, they're telling me that I say one thing and sometimes I say the next. Someone once said with good alliteration, what is man, what is woman but a comedy of contradictions? Right, so Rav Kook is agreeing. I have different netios. I have different desires. I have a yetzer tov and I have a yetzer hara. I have different thoughts. One time I think about an idea that I like, and maybe a day later I think about it again and I don't like it so much, or I don't like that idea. The same thing with interpersonal relations. Sometimes I'm having a good relationship with someone, sometimes the relationship isn't so good, and I reevaluate my relationship with that person, or the wisdom that I had engaging in a relationship with that person. We're full of conflicting feelings, and this is something that's beautiful. The very fact that we are karua, that we are torn, provides us with the opportunity to fulfill our destiny of creating harmony out of that tornness, of creating harmony out of those conflicting ideas, those conflicting thoughts and feelings. So according to Rav Kook, he turns this idea that Rivka was so distraught over into a necessary component of the human condition. And indeed, we see it play out amongst the characters of Esav and Yaakov. They themselves, as individuals, are torn as well. Esav doing kibbud ava'ain, Chazal say there was no person like Esav who championed the mitzvah of kibbud ava'ain. He was genuine and he was sincere in certain mitzvot. On the other hand, he was a very good liar. He thought that his father, or he gave the impression to his father, that he was interested in learning Torah and mitzvahs. He asked, how does one tithe, how does one give truma on salt? Trying to be very refined, trying to be very scrupulous in the halachot of tithing, to give his father, Yitzchak, the impression that he was studying Torah and that he was indeed engaged. Yaakov, as well, was torn too. How was Yaakov torn? Well, it seems that in last week's Parsha, Yaakov is best characterized as striving to be someone who he's not. He's striving to be Esav. From the very beginning, he swindles the Bechor. He swindles the birthright from Esav. He wears Esav's clothing. He brings the food that Esav would bring to his father. He takes Esav's bracha. He takes Esav's blessing. It seems that Yaakov is also torn, karua, in a way. And there are these inner conflicts within both of them. Nonetheless, Rav Kook turns this into something that has the potential for beauty and the potential for harmony. And in fact, we meditate on this every morning when we daven Shachris. We say the following words right before Kriya Shema. We say, V'yached levavenu la'ahava u'liyira et shemecha. May God unite our hearts to love and fear your name. Right? We don't say V'yached libenu, we say V'yached levavenu. Because in every heart, there's not merely a lev, but there is a levav. And the Gemara interprets that as having two different netios, two different inclinations. There's a Yetzer HaTov, and then there's a Yetzer Hara. And we're asking Hashem that He give us the wisdom and He give us the help to get it together, to bring harmony within ourselves, so that we can harmonize these conflicting thoughts and ideas within ourselves, so that we can serve God with ahava and yira. And what are these two different emotions? They're very conflicting emotions. Ahava, love, spurs us towards something, the object of our love. It draws us close. Yira, which is awe, better translated as awe and not as fear, that pushes us back. It gives us a sense of reticence, a sense of distance from the object of our fear. And yet we ask God nonetheless to unite our hearts. V'yached levavenu le'ahava u'liyira et shemecha. We're asking, in a sense, for what seems to be the impossible. We're asking to resolve contradictory feelings, contradictory netios, ideas, inclinations within ourselves. But I would like to clarify a specific idea. The title of this shir was about inheriting a Jewish legacy, and then the subtitle was from contradiction to harmony. If you read the title, you might have thought that the conclusion of the shir would be that we need to reach harmony. Harmony is the ultimate goal, and once we achieve harmony, then we've truly inherited a Jewish legacy. If that was your understanding, I apologize for being disingenuous, because that is not the way that I understood the title of this shir. The very process of movement from contradiction to harmony, that itself is the Jewish legacy. And with this we can bifurcate two different ideas, which I'll call, and yes, I'm generalizing, so there are different nuances, but just for the purposes of conceptualizing something easier, follow with me. This helps us bifurcate two different philosophies. Greek philosophy on the one hand, and Jewish philosophy on the other hand. Greek philosophy, the ideal aspect, or the ideal notion of perfection in Greek philosophy is best described as a state of being. You are in a state of perfection. If you do A, B, and C, if you do X, Y, and Z, right? If you wash negavasar every morning, you give tzedakah every day, right? This will increase your chances of being a perfect being. It's very hard, but once you achieve this place, then you are domain, then you are silent. You're in this perfect state of perfection, which is antithetical to Jewish philosophy. Jewish philosophy is not about achieving a state of perfection, but Jewish philosophy is about constantly engaging in a state of becoming. Not a state of being, like Greek philosophy idealizes. Rather, we idealize a state of becoming. And many of you might be familiar with the song from Perkei Avos, but Rabbi Tarfon tells us, Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor. It's not on us to finish the work, to finish the task, on the one hand, V'lo ata ben chorin lihivatel mimena, but it's also not on us to stop from creating this kind of harmony, creating this kind of yichud, this unity between two opposing forces. And these forces can manifest themselves within us as they manifested themselves within Rivka. It can be interpersonal strife. It can be theological, philosophical strife that we might have as individuals. They speak to us uniquely, these conflicting forces, and the Jewish approach to them is to accept them and to begin the process of harmonizing. And that's how we live our lives. Not to expect to reach a state of perfection, but rather just to begin to create this process of harmony. There was an insight that Rivka had with regards to giving the blessing or forcing Yitzchak's hand to give the blessing to Yaakov instead of Esav. And the insight can be found in the discrepancy between how Rivka tells over what she heard from Yitzchak to Esav. When Rivka is telling it over to Yaakov, she said, I heard your father, Yitzchak, say the following, right? Yitzchak said, prepare me some food and give it to me, and I'm going to cook it in the way I like it, and I'm going to bless you before I die. The pasuk says, I believe, if there's a Bal Kriya in here, you can correct me, please. Va'avarechecha lifnei moti. I'll bless you before my death. Whereas Rivka places something in her husband's mouth. She puts words in her husband's mouth when she's telling it over to her son Yaakov about what Yitzchak's plans are. She says, give me something to eat, and hunt for me food, and va'avarechecha v'tivarech nafshi lifnei Hashem b'terem moti. And I will bless, my soul will bless you before Hashem, before I die. Which means that Rivka is well aware that although she may be tricking her husband, she's not tricking the Rabboni Shalom. She knows full well what she's doing, and she knows internally that it might be something morally ambiguous, but she knows she's doing it lifnei Hashem. She knows she's doing it before Hashem. And indeed, if Hashem didn't want Yaakov to get this bracha from Yitzchak, why didn't Hashem tell Yitzchak that it was Yaakov? Why didn't Hashem tell Yitzchak, no, this isn't Esav, this is Yaakov? Why didn't Hashem stop her? Rivka was privy to this prophecy of Shnei Goyim b'bitnei. She knew the character traits of her children. Yitzchak was not privy to this prophecy. Yitzchak, who was bestowing the blessing, was also not privy to the fact that it wasn't the right person before him to whom he wanted to give this blessing. So it seems that Hashem was on Rivka's side. So what was the blessing that Yitzchak gave to Yaakov? One of the key phrases in that blessing was that Hashem should bless Esav, whom we know was really Yaakov, mital hashamayim umishamnei haaretz, from the dew of the heavens and from the fat of the earth. This is a very physical blessing. It's not a blessing of a brit. It's not a blessing of a covenant, which really focuses on banim, children, and Yerusha, inheritance, inheriting a land. Yitzchak thought that what the blessing he was giving was a very materialistic blessing, and he thought it would complement Esav's strengths. Esav was a very materially oriented man. He was a man of the field. He was a strong person. He was a gibor. He was self-reliant, and Yitzchak felt that the bracha should therefore enhance his strengths. Rivka's insight, on the other hand, was one of harmony. Rivka knew that you can be an ish tam yoshev ba'ohalim, you can be a simple, pure person and tend to sit in the Beit Midrash, and you can be strong physically and materially successful as well. And so she knew that the bracha that Yaakov needed wasn't one that would complement his strengths, but was one that would supplement and complement Yaakov's weaknesses. Yaakov was a person of one netiya, of one inclination. Comes along Rivka and says, you know what, you need something which might be incompatible, which would actually help you develop into a fuller person, into a fuller human being. I myself know very well that I do not have the flights of intuition that Albert Einstein has, and I probably won't ever. But I won't put it past me. Comes along Rivka and says, I can still learn calculus and appreciate some of the fundamental principles of mathematics, and it doesn't have to be completely alien to me. If you see yourself as a Baal Chesed, that's your thing. You do Chesed. Comes along Rivka with this complementary harmonic notion and says, maybe you should spend a bit more time in the Beis Medrash learning Gemara a little bit. If you see yourself as an Ish Tam Yoshev Ba'olim, that's the kind of person I am. My cup of tea is to sit in the Beis Medrash. Comes along Rivka and says, make sure you get your exercise. Join a gym. Maybe you could be a Baal Chesed a bit more as well. And you should engage in more mitzvot other than just learning. And this was Rivka's insight, where you harmonize two opposing agendas, two opposing ideals. And in conclusion, I just want to quote from the Hesped that was given in Lorraine's memory. And the Hesped says the following, this paragraph says the following. The flame of Yiddishkeit burned strongly within her, within Lorraine. When Mom decided we were going to have a kosher home, we had a kosher home. When she decided she wasn't going to drive on Shabbos, it was a major commitment changing our family lifestyle to be so different from those around us. She gave up all her non-Jewish friends to try to cultivate a Jewish environment. Gradually, Shabbos became Shabbos. Mom leading the way, and Dad following his Eishes Chayil. There are a couple character traits that Lorraine shares with Rivka, a couple character traits that Lorraine is able to actualize, which is related to the wisdom of Rav Kook that we've just learned. She was able to recognize that life's trajectory is a process. It's not about only the end goal. It's not about a state of perfection. But as a Baalat Tshuva, life is an ongoing process. In essence, all of us are Baalei Tshuva. And she wasn't afraid to take that mantle of being a Baal Tshuva up, to make some strong sacrifices, sacrificing friends, family, being able to see her children in order to sacrifice for them such that they could get a Jewish education. These are conflicting values, and sometimes, instead of harmonizing, you have to drop one value and focus more on another to create the better harmony. She recognized that life is a process of resolving contradictions, not merely rejecting something always. A woman of peace who would make shalom at the Shabbos table. She wasn't focused merely on perfection and wasn't disheartened by imperfection. This process, this notion of a true Jewish legacy, of moving from contradiction to harmony, constant movement, is a legacy that truly lives on. And it is this process, this legacy, which will live on, Bezrat Hashem, in her children and her grandchildren, and it is indeed among the greatest gifts that we can give to our children. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Shor, for that very inspiring and insightful lecture. I know that you did not have the opportunity to personally meet or know my mother-in-law, but your insight, your observations, your analysis sounds to me like it would have perfectly matched the inner turmoil that she would have felt as she left her non-Jewish friends and the treif world behind and moved her family into a more Jewish environment. I'd like to share a couple of thoughts, and some of them overlap just a touch with Parshat Toledot that we read yesterday. We are all, of course, familiar with how Yaakov was able to acquire the firstborn blessings from his father Yitzchak, which should have been given to Esav with the help of his mother Rivka. We saw how Hashem arranged for the decline in Yitzchak's vision, both literally and figuratively, to make this possible. Literally, in that Yitzchak had to rely on his sense of touch to actually identify his oldest son Esau, and so therefore he was fooled. Figuratively, as we are told, the patriarch, the leader of the Jewish people, Yitzchak, did not see the future consequences of his decision if Esau were to receive the blessing. So it fell upon Rivka to engineer the switch. Similarly, in the Haftorah for Toledot, we saw that the Kohanim were encouraged to live up to their calling as teachers and role models. What do these events have in common? The crucial requirement of leadership is to show the way, to look to the future, and to recognize that actions speak louder than words. My mother-in-law was such a woman. She understood that living and growing up in Newfoundland was a one-way street to assimilation. There was no Jewish wedding in the shul in St. John's between my in-laws' wedding and our wedding, a span of 22 years. She recognized that more than 3 hours a week of Hebrew school, which typically ended when you were bar mitzvah, was needed to ensure the survival of her Jewish family. And so she introduced kashrut and Shabbat into the daily life to educate and inculcate a love of Judaism in her family. I would like to end by completing a story that I started at her Levaya 1 year ago. I had mentioned that I've known my mother-in-law for over 55 years. And considering that Lisa and I are only married for 43 years, it needs some explanation. I studied Latin in grades 7 and 8, and my mother-in-law was my tutor. I clearly remember sitting at the kitchen table, noshing on homemade cookies and cake, which were always prepared and waiting for me, and reviewing what I should have learned. And now for the rest of the story. When you learn a new language, you learn very rigidly the structure of the language. And when you learn a verb, you learn how to conjugate that verb, and you learn all the tenses of that verb. And the first verb that we learned in Latin was the verb to love. Amo, amari, amawi, amata. And we learned to conjugate that verb. I love, you love, he, she loves, we love, you love, they love. And in Latin, the conjugations are reflected in the endings of the verbs. And so it became amo, amas, amat, amamas, amatas, amant. Once I had mastered that, she taught me the Yiddish version. And that was amo, amas, amat, amamas, atatas, akint. I recognized that this exercise beautifully reflected her love of family, her love of learning, and her love of Judaism. I learned a lot of things from my mother-in-law about childhood in Newfoundland during the war and the hardships they faced. I saw her personal strength, which of course came from her faith, in dealing with her medical challenges, in bringing Yiddishkeit to her family, standing up for what is right, and making difficult decisions. May we all share only smachot from now on, and may the neshama of Frumalea, Bar Aryeh, Leib, Miriam have an aliyah. Rabbi Franco from the B'nai Torah Adult Education Committee will make a few concluding remarks.
I just wanted to add to Ken's thank you to Rabbi Shore on behalf of B'nai Torah's Adult Education Committee. And we would like very much to thank our sponsors of the evening, Lisa and Ken, Greta and Alan. You know, sometimes we on the Adult Education Committee troll through the Yortzeit list to look for upcoming Yortzeits, people to approach to sponsor an event, a lecture. In this case, Lisa and Ken and Greta and Alan came to us several months ago, said we would like to sponsor a lecture to commemorate the Yortzeit. And this should be a role model for everyone else to come forward in a fashion, such a fashion. So again, we thank you, Lisa, Ken, Greta, Alan, and just wanted to call everybody's attention, draw everybody's attention to some upcoming educational activities. This coming Wednesday night, B'nai Torah has its book review, book discussion at the home of Roz and Ben Schultz at 7:30 p.m. And then on Wednesday of the week of Hanukkah, Wednesday, December 5th, at 7:45 p.m., Rabbi Milevsky will be giving a lecture entitled Kashrut, Vices and Virtues. Everyone is invited. Refreshments will now be served in the Furman foyer. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.